Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Insights at Ballet Vero Beach. We are back on Zoom because my guest today is coming to us from the Northeast. I put on a jacket just so that I could match her and we could all pretend that we're wintry. Ariel Grossman, how are you? It is so good to have you, to see you actually, honestly.
I know, you too. Every time I'm like, he's so good looking.
And I know that this will come out after this, but also two Jews during Hanukkah talking together. How
Happy
amazing.
Hanukkah.
Happy
Happy
Hanukkah.
Hanukkah.
So I am super excited because our January program features not only your Ori, which this will be the second time we have done the piece, but the third time Vero audiences will have an opportunity to see it. But finally, Ballet Vero Beach is bringing to the stage our version of your Rust. I know your company has been performing it for quite some time, but we got together in 2019 to commission this work. And then we all know that in 2020, right before we could perform it, the world shut down and we're all still recovering. Before we talk about all that, I would love it if you could sort of reintroduce yourself to our audiences by telling us a little bit about your background. How did you get into dance? That sort of thing.
Sure. So I grew up in New York City. I definitely took ballet when I was very, very little, like 3 or 4 years old, in the community room in my building. And there's like pictures of me and my sister.
Ironically, isn't that where your company many years later had their first performances, in the community room of your parents' building in New York? Okay, sorry,
Yes,
I promise not to interrupt, but I think that's
no,
fascinating.
you don't promise that because it can't happen. No, yes. I mean, I remember it's just so funny because the other day we were talking about dancer salaries and like hourly pay for rehearsal and like what's appropriate. And I was like, guys, I used to pay my dancers in snacks. Like when we would rehearse there, I'd be like, I can't pay you, but like I'm gonna bring you strawberries and grapes and like crackers. So, and that was, they were like, it's fine.
Not
Like,
even protein, ladies and gentlemen.
no, there was no protein. There was no, but we did use that space. And it was a big, wide open space. The floor was horrible, but like I made a lot of stuff there. Yeah, so I grew up in the city and I actually remember, I think it was in the end of second grade, I had a friend who was going to the Joffrey Ballet School and I was like, Mommy, I want to do ballet. And she always tells me like for a lot of things, she waited like a month or two to see like how serious I was about something, like getting my ears pierced. She like waited for me to ask like 10 times or something. Then she knew everything.
A chart, like she's like,
right. Okay, this is the 5th time she's asked. Let's do it one more time. And so I started, I think over that summer, I went and did a class and was wearing like a gymnastics outfit. I remember this and like looking, and I think they must have been doing like dégagés to the side or dégagés on quad. I mean, they weren't that much older than me. They were probably like a year or two older than me, but they've been doing ballet for a few years. So I remember looking at it and like the memory later of like, oh, I know what they were doing, but I remember looking at them like, how are they doing that with their legs? Like,
it's amazing. How
are
they
doing? Yes. I'm like so confused and probably falling down. But and then I started at the Joffrey and I was there like through high school. And I was in actually the Joffrey's last Nutcracker that they ever did in New York
before they moved to Chicago.
Before they moved to Chicago. I'm actually going to Chicago tomorrow for the first time ever. And I'm hoping to see their Nutcracker.
Oh, I love Chicago. I can't believe you've never been. I think you'll.
Yes, send me some recs.
I will for sure. So you ended up, I mean, the Joffrey Ballet School, especially at that time when the company was still in New York, and then even the first few years after they moved to Chicago, they've since rebranded a lot, but they're still a very prestigious school. But especially at that time when you were there, that was one of the most prestigious ballet schools in New York. So I'm always curious about this, and I think you've told me the story before, but I want you to tell our audience, how did you sort of move away from ballet and into more contemporary and modern dance? What was that like?
I mean, I feel like now it makes so much sense, like knowing who I am as a as a human.
I mean,
And
it
actually
makes total sense to me,
right,
but other people need to know the story.
for sure. No one, but I think like I'm always sort of surprised and proud at how much I loved ballet. And I loved, I mean, I'm a huge talker, but like it didn't bother me that we couldn't talk. I loved the ritual of it. I loved how much you came back. I mean, you know, my dad's a golfer and I'm always like, it's so boring. But at the same time, like I understand and I can relate to the going back to the same routine every day and honing your skill. And I remember like discovering and rediscovering new ideas and ways of thinking and approaching, you know, a tendu or whatever it was that we were working on that I just was like so fascinated by.
Well,
And I think I did slowly start to like feel or find ways of like really expressing myself while
yeah.
doing ballet. Go ahead. What's your question? You can't hold it.
It's not a question. You know what's funny that I literally have never thought about till this moment? Because yes, like, oh, Ariel, contemporary and modern dance, like it totally makes sense in conversation with you. But when you are staging work, to like the super frustration of other artistic directors and things like that, you're constantly working on it. I mean, like you are constantly changing. Like sometimes people have to drag you out of the studio and say, it's enough, Ariel, let's just perform it by now. So it makes sense to me what you're talking about, why you gravitated towards ballet, because that really is the work of a ballet student. Like you have to obsess over that tendu for 15, 20 years, and you might never actually discover everything about it.
Right.
Never put two and two together, but that makes a lot of sense.
But I think it's interesting that you say that because I do also feel like there's a lot of pieces for a long time. I think I'm in a different phase right now. I think the pandemic sort of, like with Rust and also with this other piece Unorthodox and this other small duet that I made, If I Forget You, because we didn't perform them for so long, I did go back and made a lot of changes and sort of had to because I was like a year older and the work was a year older and you forget things. But I do think for a long time, I really was very good at like, it's done, it's in the dancer's hands, it's on the stage. And now I don't think it's smart to just leave something. I think it's very smart to leave some things. Like some things you can always change things. Things can always be changed. It can always be better. But just because like my perception of it has changed doesn't mean that it needs to be changed.
Exactly.
And it's a hard thing to just sort of like sit with. Especially when I am creating.
Yeah. Sometimes the audiences or even the dancers, they know more than we do as choreographers. Like if it hits that perfect note for them, like me too, like I have to sit on my hands. I have to be like, I'm not going to change it. I really want to. I see that moment that I really want to mess with, but clearly something that I don't get is resonating with either the dancers or the audience. And I just have to sort of say, okay, that's what it is. We're going to leave it as that.
Right. Well, and I think also a lot changes when the dancers really know the movement and it becomes part of them and once they've performed it, and you have to sort of like let it. I mean, my mom just said this the other day about brisket, like it tastes so much better the next day. And it's true, like you have to let it cook, you have to let it sit, and then it's not really up to you anymore.
You should have had your mom and your dad as part of this too. They would have been
they didn't come to Vero Beach. I think David's parents came to Vero Beach, but next time.
So tell me again, just to double back, how did you end up from being at Joffrey Ballet School, which, you know, yes, there's a lot of contemporary sensibility with the Joffrey aesthetic, but how did you end up in contemporary dance and starting Ariel Rivka Dance?
I'll try to make it short, but basically, I mean, at Joffrey, we really did not, I had ballet. I mean, I did a ton of ballet and I went to ballet summer programs. And I think I took jazz sometimes on Saturdays. But I went to LaGuardia High School. When I went to LaGuardia Performing Arts High School, I started taking Graham every day. Yep. And Graham is also like very technical and very specific.
Yeah, very structured, very
structured. It's not, you know, throw yourself on the floor in that way.
Dippy. Let's call it hippy dippy. It's not.
It is very emotional though. And I think that's what I connected to. Right. And then one of my teachers who just left the board, she was on the board for a long time, Elisa King, you know, I remember she would choreograph some pieces. So that was really like my first, and Svi Gothiner, she danced for him, Elisa, and I would go to some of their rehearsals sometimes, which was such an amazing experience. And I think that was like really the first time I was exposed to other kinds of movement, still super into ballet. And then I went to college. I had surgery on my knee. And then I was like, oh, I guess I'll go to college. I was going to be a ballet dancer. I was like, maybe I won't. But I went to college and basically made conservatory for myself, kind of, while also, having an academic minor. But I think like one of the biggest influences, I will say, was the summer between my freshman and sophomore year. I did the program at Ailey. I moved home and I did, I got like, it's such a crazy story because there's like 8 levels of ballet and they put me in level 4. And there's like 4 levels of modern, they put me in level 4. And I was like, I'm definitely better at ballet than I am at modern. And this guy, Alan Barnes, who was a dancer with William Forsythe, he was choreographing a piece for the summer program performance. And I was like, I really want to do it, but you had to be in like level 6 or 7. And I like begged them to let me audition. They're like, but you can't even be on point. You're in level 4. And I was like, please. Anyway, they let me audition. He loved me. So they had to move me up because they wanted me in his piece. They just had misplaced me. I never did well in like big groups. Yeah. So, and his work, it was on point. It was a piece on point. But it was like contemporary. And I was like, oh my, like moving your hips and moving your body that way was like totally new to me. And I remember actually a number of pieces, and I think probably still today, like some of the walking that he did was like, it's in my head. Like I'll never forget like this new kind of like walking across the stage. You don't just walk like a normal human. Now I'm in a phase where I'm like, I think walking is really interesting. Yeah. Normal walking. Right. And then I graduated college and I started choreographing a bit. A friend of mine from college had created this collective and asked me to create some works, and I did. And I had never really thought of myself as a choreographer before. But my senior year of college, I also had really hurt my back and wasn't able to dance that much. So I decided to make a thesis for my senior year, and it was 5 women on point, and it was also like modern ballet, contemporary. And I just sort of continued with that idea, but it didn't have point shoes mostly. And then I met David, who said, Ariel, like, you should just like have your own company. And I was like, what are you talking about? That's insane. And he was like, well, I was like, I'm not doing it by myself. And he was an arts administrator at the time. And I said, okay, well then you have to do it with me. Like, I don't know how to do this. And so we did, and we started the company, and he wrote a lot of music. And yeah, he helped me run it. I mean, he was the executive director, I think, until like 5 or 6 years ago when I became the executive director, and we had a board. And now we have an actual executive director who's not me, which is amazing for the first time.
I'm looking forward to that for Ballet Vero Beach. So
I don't know if you could relinquish that control though.
See, she knows me well, ladies and gentlemen. She knows
it's hard. It's hard, but at the same time, like it does. I think if I didn't have children and I didn't have like another job that I had, maybe I could do it more, but it is, I really love it. I think
that's the thing, is that like, even for us, the company has just grown so much that it was not a question of whether I wanted to relinquish control in certain aspects. It was that it was a necessity, because either it was going to end me or we were going to have to end the company. So now 10 years in, I mean, we actually have some staff. I'm still, artistic director and CEO, but we have staff that.
But I think you're also, to give you a huge compliment, really good at that stuff, and like the skills that you need to run a company, I could develop over time, maybe, but like that's not what my forte is. I'm a creator, and I'm also a good face. I can talk to people and get them excited about the company, but like the administrative stuff is hard for me.
Right. Well, and I mean, you also have you have a real artistic vision, so it's nice to hear that you are starting to have a staff that can support that and really push that forward. So how your company is Ariel Rivka Dance, how old is the company now?
I think it's like 16. I think we're having our 17th season.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
impressive. That's super
Hasn't,
impressive.
yeah, it hasn't been, you know, like this for that long. I think
But
probably like 8 years it's been like this.
yeah, but nothing, I mean, nothing is. There's always fits and starts and growths and retractions and everything like that. So let's bring it to the fact that in 2017, your company was the invited company for our Riverside Dance Festival, and you guys were here for the summer. And I will tell a quick story about that. So I think 2 years prior, I opened up applications, and we got like 12 or 15 from like all over the country and all over the world. And I loved Ariel's application. Like the work was amazing. The way she wrote about her work was amazing. But there was a company that I wanted to bring ahead of her. So I basically said, hey, so we want you, but can we wait a year? And I wrote her this really nice letter, and she wrote back almost immediately, said, well, that's the best rejection letter I've ever gotten. So yes, we can wait a year. And actually, I'm happy to come in 2 summers as opposed to
No,
this.
I don't think you told me that.
I
I think what
absolutely
you
did.
told me, you said, you didn't get in this year, but I highly encourage you to apply.
That's
Like,
not
please
true.
apply.
That's
You
not
said
how it
something that was like, please apply. And I think what happened was that then the next year you emailed me and was like, and you were like, have you sent in your application yet? Like,
maybe.
you didn't tell me
I
like, oh,
remember
it's a
that.
shoo-in, but I remember being like, oh, like he's really interested.
I hate to say it, but we're both not as young as we used to be, and I can't remember anything anymore.
Oh, nothing.
So one of the things that really struck me about your work and why I thought it was so compelling and why I thought it was so important to bring to Vero was not just the structure of it, because you and I both know with contemporary dance, sometimes you just lose that rigor and that structure. It's very like, this is the energy level throughout. You don't get the peaks and valleys. You don't get the emotional resonance. But when you really find good contemporary choreographers, you get that. And that was absolutely there. And I was struck by the fact that your company was female driven. You were running the company, you were choreographing. All of your dancers still are women. And I thought that was, and this was pre-Me Too and everything like that. I just thought that this was really important for us to show the young people that were students in the program that it's not always, the boys that get the leadership positions. And you had really created this thing for yourself and these dancers. Did you always know that you just wanted to have women in the company? Did you ever think about adding men?
So I did have men in the beginning. I think in the very beginning, I only had women because I really just worked with people I knew, or like, college friends, and men were not working for free.
Not for snacks.
Not for snacks. Except the snack. I'm just joking.
I love it.
I don't know. And I think like from the very beginning, like partnering, like physical partnering and lifting, and that was not something that interested me in a male female dynamic. And I've said this a few times, that I think like because I came from such a ballet background, that the partnerships between men and women were so defined in a very specific way.
Yep.
I mean, in contemporary pieces, it's not as much, but like it's the man lifting the woman, and it's usually a romantic relationship.
Right.
And so I wasn't like super drawn to that. The first piece I made, when I graduated college, it was 5 women, and I loved that. I thought that was interesting. I did work with 2 or 3 men, a little bit in the very early years, and it just didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't want to think of them as like the man in the company. I was like, you're another dancer. Like, you're another dancer. I'm not going to use you. Although I did make a piece about my family. I think one of them was my dad, but besides that,
I feel like it's, again, that's one of the things that always draws me to your work, is that even when you don't necessarily know what it is or exactly where you're going, you have a very strong sense of when it's not what you want. You know what I mean? It's and I think that that's really great as a choreographer, like to know that, okay, this isn't quite right, and we're going to keep working on it till it is, but it goes beyond just the actual steps with you. It goes into, you know, I'm talking about you gravitate towards working with a group of women. You gravitate towards a very specific sensibility. And I think that's one of the reasons that I believe that your company has lasted this long, because a lot of people are just sort of shifting, you know, shifting with the wind. Like, oh, this is the new hot type of music. Let's put that in there, where you really take your time with what you want to say. So speaking of that, one of the two works on our program, again, like I said at the beginning of this, you presented it when you all were here for the summer. I immediately fell in love with it and wanted the women in our company to have the experience of dancing that and like that. So we were the first professional company to license any of your works. So we're talking about Ori, which in Hebrew means my light, and it is a dance for 7 women. It's become a hallmark of your company. And when we presented it, like, people love it down here. So people are like, yes, it's coming back. I'm buying tickets just so I can see that again. Do you have any inclination why, or what was your inspiration for that?
I really don't. I mean, it's funny because I had found a couple pictures, and there's a picture of Eva when she was like just starting to walk, and she has like a little walker in rehearsal. And I think that was the year we made that piece. And we were using the studios at LaGuardia, which are these beautiful, huge studios. And I think that David wrote the music as we were working on it, if I remember correctly. It certainly wasn't recorded.
Right.
I think the first time it was played with instruments was live at the performance. So every rehearsal we had was like of a electronic recording, and then he recorded it afterwards. I do remember that we had like 3 sections, and I was like, there needs to be something else. And we ended up calling it like 2.5, because it was in the middle of 2 and 3. And it wasn't like its own section, but it's so different than the rest of the piece. It's sort of like this like fairy world in my mind, like just sort of like light and gentle and sleepy. This was one of those pieces that I didn't have like a theme, really. I just went in and like created movement, and I had just hired 3 new dancers who were phenomenal and moved very differently. Casey, Caitlin, and Allie, who's no longer with us, but Casey and Caitlin are still there. And they still, I mean, Casey in particular, I would say, she will not do anything the same as what I do. Like, I do something and she just does something different from it, you know. And she went to Lines, and I think that that's sort of where she got that training from. But it really is inspiring, and I don't always take the suggestion, but I think seeing that sort of response encouraged me to encourage the other dancers, like, okay, like, where do you want to go next? Like, what's happening with your body here? And I think I was like, you know, still pretty postpartum, so I wasn't moving as well as most of them. Yeah, I don't know. I just like,
funny because it has, like, I mean, that's a real tribute to the troupe that you had put together at that time, because Ori in particular has this amazing sort of sweeping breadth in the music quality and the movement quality. Like, I mean, it just goes flying from here to there and everywhere. So to be able to do that after just, you know, having a child and not being moving, like it's honestly one of my favorite contemporary works. And I'm super, like, I'm just proud that we have it in our rep. And the fact that, it's funny that you mentioned Casey and Allie. When we first did it, you sent them to stage it, and now we have our own dancers putting it together who were in it the last time, but also we have Kylie, one of your other like just amazing dancers with eyes on it. So it really is this, it goes to that, I mean, not to harken back to the ballet tradition, but it goes into that passing it from people, passing it from you to the dancers to us. And now we have dancers that have been inside the work that are passing it on to other people. What's funny is that one of the young people that you worked with when you were down here in the summer program, Gina, we've actually hired Gina in to do Ori. So she's going to actually get to graduate into Ori. So I think
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
it's super cool. She's 22 now. She's graduating college. Can you believe it? I know, right?
Max is going to be, he's 5.5. So yeah, I mean, it was 5 years ago. It's crazy. But it's funny because it's just interesting thinking about like sending Casey and Allie, because Allie is like very specific and Casey is specific, but also like really full and open. And I think it was purposeful that we sent these two dancers so the company could see, learn the movement, and then here are the choices that you can make and how you approach it, which I think is one of the things that is unique to the company, and that we hope when people dance it, that you are together, you need to be on the music, but you can choose, how you interpret the movement.
And I think that that's kind of a perfect segue into Rust. So once we took Ori into our rep, I said to you, I have this challenge for you. I want you to make something for our men, the men we had in the company at the time. And so in the summer of 2019, I brought Camilo and Anders and Cameron and Matthew to New York City to basically get in the studio and make this piece, Rust. And I kind of told you it had to be done in like 4.5 days. Like there was no, I'm like, this is it. We're sinking the money. Like you guys were awesome and you got us housing and stuff like that, but everyone was there. Like we paid for the plane tickets. I was paying for food and all that sort of stuff. But what transpired from that is our dancers were in the studio. Your dancers were in the studio to facilitate the process. We had what we thought we were going to be performing the following April. But then March 13th, the world shut down and we just haven't been able to get it to the point where it fit in a season until now. And now it's 2022. But we always had the agreement that you could keep it for your company as well. You guys have been performing it for how many years now?
We did it at our season in 21.
Okay, so you all have already been performing it and we haven't yet. And
actually we performed it that March also. We didn't open. We were going to perform it that year.
Yeah.
That spring we were going to perform it. And then, so the dancers already knew it.
So what's really interesting about it is when I said to you, I said, okay, we're finally doing Rust, but I know you made a lot of, I don't know how much, but you did alter a lot for your company based on that summer, like since that summer of 2019, like when we had recorded it. And I said to you, what are we doing? Are we doing your version? And you said, no, absolutely do your version. I'll look at it. But I think that really speaks to what you were saying about Ori and your dancers, is the fact that you really do give people you give them the ability to interpret and to make choices. And honestly, even to the point where we thought that we were going to give you this challenge of working with all men. Well, it turns out our production that we're about to do in January, it's going to have hopefully Camilo and Anders, but two of our friends from Converge Dance. So it's going to be a mixed gender cast.
It's going to be gorgeous.
But you also know the ladies from Converge Dance, because when we were up there in 2019, I made them come take class and I said, you guys need to work together. And you created a pandemic piece that was filmed for them. So it feels like at this point that, I'm going to put it this way. From the moment that you and I first met, I feel like we had this odd brother-sister connection, like just the way we treat each other, like rolling eyes and walking away from each other and stuff like that. Like it's always been that way. And I'm just so happy now that it feels like the family has been extended, both with your network of people who want you to create things on them in New York, but also us being able to do more of your work. It feels like, all those years ago when I watched that video of your work and I'm like, yes, 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 it feels like it's come together despite tremendous challenges over the past few years. So
Yeah.
I'm really, really excited for that. I'm excited for the future. And I cannot wait for our audiences to see both Rust and Ori. Is there anything else you want to say about the works or anything before we finish this?
I think just the only thing that's interesting to me, going back to sort of the beginning of our conversation with Rust, is like one of the reasons why it changed so much is because I had more time with it.
Mhm.
And I think we did a really good version in those 4 days, but then it sat, and then it sat with me, and then I got to revisit it, and the music was recorded.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, I think the version you're doing is not the original. I think it is closer to what we've changed it.
Yes, because we did have some studio rehearsals and some Zoom and yeah, absolutely. I think they're close.
Yes.
That's one time we should, I know you guys already have a film of Rush. We should put everything together and I'd love this on Zoom,
Side by side.
like a side by side of the ladies and
I would love that.
I think that would be crazy. You probably have to watch it a couple times because you're going to be back and forth like a tennis match. All right, my dear, I'm going to push pause on the recording, but everyone should come see Program 1, 2
Yes,
works
please
by
do.
Ariel
Thank you
Grossman.
so much, Adam. It's
Well,
been such a pleasure.
I adore you.